Upon this ground over 150 years ago, and more than 800 miles from the rocky coastline and timbered forests of down east Maine that they called home, the men of the 1st Maine Heavy Artillery became part of an incredible story. One that, until now, has gone mostly untold. A story of courage, of sacrifice. A story that consecrated this ground with the blood of men from Maine in the service of their country. The 1st Maine Heavy Artillery started out as the 18th Maine Regiment and was raised as part of Abraham Lincoln's call in the spring of 1862 for additional 3-year regiments from each state. The men of the 18th Maine were drawn from up and down eastern Maine. Some came from towns in the Penobscot River Valley. Some came from Bangor and the surrounding area. Others came from along the central coast, including the towns of Ellsworth and Mount Desert Island. As with most regiments early in the war, the officers were known to the men from civilian life. As the 18th Maine forms, Daniel Chaplin, then serving as a major in the 2nd Maine Regiment, is promoted to colonel and placed in command.
The colonel of the 1st Maine Heavy is a guy by the name of Dan Chaplin. He's a businessman out of Bangor, considered as a merchant of some kind, but he has the respect and regard of the men who are serving under him. He's considered to have integrity, he cares for them, they will follow him. They will take his orders and they will do what he says.
In August of 1862, the 18th Maine left the state and headed for Washington, D.C. When they arrived, the defenses protecting the federal capital were still in need of strengthening, and quickly the men of the 18th got to work, cutting trees and digging entrenchments. Their efficiency with the saw and spade allowed them to remain in and around the capital while other regiments were moved to the front.
And these guys set up camp around D.C., and they're in Georgetown, they're in Arlington, and they're part of the perimeter defense, and they do a lot of drilling. And from their perspective, wartime's pretty easy. They like it. They've figured out how to do the things that they did at home. They can cut trees, they can dig ditches, they can build breastworks and redoubts and abatis, and they were able to figure out how to take care of themselves even better than that because they had some real ingenious guys in the regiment.
The 18th Maine Infantry Regiment is renamed the 1st Maine Heavy Artillery Regiment and spends much of 1863 in ready watchfulness as the war and talk of battles swirls around them. Chancellorsville, Winchester, Aldie, Middleburg, Vicksburg, Gettysburg.
There was some grousing about that because that's not what these guys signed up for. But at the same time, they were thinking, yeah, okay. But to become a heavy artillery regiment, the number of men in each company was increased by 50, and they added 2 additional companies. So by then, you're now talking not 1,000 men, but close to 1,800.
Even though they were not being moved to the front, Daniel Chaplin and the other officers spent many hours drilling the men, making sure their military skills and discipline did not slip. In March of 1864, Ulysses S. Grant is named overall commander of the Union forces, and he comes east. One of his first priorities is to pursue General Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, and after 3 years of bitter and heated engagements, he realizes that he will need a lot more men to get the job done.
Union Command decided that some of these guys who had been on the perimeter defense, like the 1st Massachusetts Heavy Artillery, the 1st Maine, let's press them into service as infantry regiments, which meant, guys, pack up, hit the road, we're going to give you your muskets, and you're going to be part of the Army.